Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another Live at 5. I am your host, Curator Kevin Adkisson with the Cranbrook Center for Collections and Research. And today, we are here back in Cranbrook House, and I want to focus on this humble wooden screen behind me. If you have visited Cranbrook House in the last few years, or even if you've been one of our many volunteer docents for the House and Gardens Auxiliary, or if you've worked in Cranbrook House, you probably don't recognize this screen. And yet, it is actually one of the very oldest items in Cranbrook House, as far as the length of time that it was in the Booth family. Now, my introduction to this really gorgeous Renaissance revival carved teak screen was when Leslie Mayo, the associate registrar, and I were busy doing an inventory down in the basement of Cranbrook House. And you may have heard me talk about inventories before here at Live at 5. We've been doing inventories here at Cranbrook since the 19-teens, so I can go back many, many decades and look over 100 years of mostly insurance inventories. Today we're doing something entirely different. We're doing essentially museum inventories. And so Leslie and I were down in the basement just sort of getting a sense of what is here. And the basement is not a sort of place where there are lots of things that are unknown. The basement is more a place where there are lots of things that are unknown by generations of staffers. And so the basement doesn't hold that many secrets, but it holds secrets if you're new. And Leslie and I have both been here about 5 years, and we did not know this screen was down there. We began to do some research into the screen, and it was in horrible shape. It was in multiple pieces. It was falling apart. There were a lot of pieces missing. And so as I went to archives and looked for pictures, I saw that the screen was almost always right here. And then I realized the screen was actually even back in the Detroit house for George and Ellen Booth. And this is a little bit murky whether it is the exact same screen, but I argue that it is, because in Mr. Booth's inventories, when he was packing up his house on Trumbull Avenue and Maple Avenue, what's now Trumbull and Martin Luther King, he listed every single item that he was going to take from the Trumbull Avenue house up to his new family home at Cranbrook. And on that list is a screen. And I do believe that it was this screen. And I'll tell you why exactly I think it is the same screen in a moment. So Leslie and I found it down in the basement. We find pictures that show it being used here in the dining room, and I lug it out of the basement. It is very, very heavy. It's much more heavy than you might think a folding wooden screen would be because it is teak wood. And the reason that the screen is here at all is that if you look behind the screen, you'll see that there's a door into the butler's pantry. And I'll talk about how the house was used as a sort of place of hosting dinners in a moment. But to return to the screen, if you attended our Christmas tour last year, which was done by the center and some of the volunteers of the Cranbrook House and Gardens Auxiliary, you know that the screen was actually here for that Zoom tour. It was in good enough shape that for a virtual tour that wasn't focused on the screen, I thought it was interesting to bring the screen back as I was setting the house back up in a way that was more similar to how the George and Ellen Booth would have lived in the house. And of course, George and Ellen, Cranbrook's co-founders, lived here from 1908 to 1949. So I brought the screen up then, and just seeing it going from the basement where it was underneath other furniture, which it should never have been. It was underneath other furniture. It was underneath plastic. It was underneath a lot of dust, a lot of bugs, and other sort of grossness that you get in a basement. Leslie and I are we brought the screen up and it just looked beautiful at Christmas. And we said, we cannot put this back in the basement. So we moved the screen out of the way. We put it into a better storage. We boxed up all the little broken pieces that had been allowed to sort of fall apart and off of the screen. But we knew we didn't even have all of the pieces of the screen. But we put them in a box. We labeled it all. And then through the House and Gardens endowment funds and through the annual maintenance funds that, because of the House and Gardens and its 50-year history of maintaining the house and raising money for the house, we were able to, this year, restore the screen. And so from May until about 2 weeks ago, the screen was out at Mark Gervaisi's studio. Mark Gervaisi is a wood conservator. He spent most of his career, over 30 years, at the Henry Ford Museum of American Innovation out in Dearborn. And I want to now get a little bit closer to the screen and show you all in our very dark room a little bit about what Mark was able to do. Now, the style of this screen, it's very Victorian. That's part of why I believe that it comes from the Trumbull Avenue house, because the style of it is more geared towards 1890 than 1908. It's more like what the Booths were purchasing for their house in Detroit. And it has all of this really gorgeous scroll work that is again carved in teak. And the teak wood is interesting because every other piece of dark wooden furniture, including the wooden panels that you see on the walls, is oak. And so you are in a house that is just chock-a-block full of oak furniture, and here's a piece of teak. And that, again, is telling me this probably was not made for Cranbrook House or purchased for Cranbrook House. And the teak is an interesting conundrum historically, because you would not have had an English woodworker or an American woodworker necessarily working in teak wood. And so what Mark suspects and what I support is that this piece was carved in Southeast Asia for a Western market. And so you are actually seeing the handicraft of perhaps Indonesian woodworkers, workers in India, perhaps in Portuguese Goa. There are a number of different places, and this is a little bit outside of my specialty, so if further research changes what I'm telling you now, please forgive me. But there are a lot of places where this screen could have been carved, none of them likely in a sort of English-speaking world. And so when we look at the decoration and you see sort of wonderful sort of heraldic crest like this with the eagle and the pattern, I have to wonder, where is this coming from? Is this actually a sort of English or German heraldic crest? Or is it simply carved in a manner made to look like the Renaissance as part of this global sort of eclecticism of the Victorian age, where you would have had pattern books that would have been published in London being used in Asia, in South Asia, by craftsmen to make furniture in a wood, in teak that is growing in Asia. And then it's carved in a style that's based off of Italian trends in the 1500s that are suddenly popular throughout the Western world in the 1880s and 1890s. I think that this screen, for its sort of humble beauty, really can tell us a lot about global trade and how design trends were not static. Design trends didn't start in London and come to New York and then Detroit. Design trends could go from London to Goa to Burma and back to Detroit to Grand Rapids, where screens like this would have been carved in oak. But again, ours is teak. It's more unlikely that teak wood would not have been shipped to America and then carved in Grand Rapids. If this was a Grand Rapids made piece, like most of the furniture in Cranbrook House, I think it would be in oak. The teak also explains why it is so very, very heavy. Now, as we look at the piece, you're seeing all different sort of faces that are carved into the top pieces of the screen. Sometimes they're simply cartouches. You're seeing a whole different variety of botanic forms, so whether those are flowers like you see on the right or little faces that are growing out of flowers on the left, makes me think of sort of Pompeian wall paintings. And so Going back to the restoration work that we've just completed on the screen, if you think about how you would move this in your house, where are you going to grab it? I mean, it sort of wants you to grab on to the empty spots and sort of lift it. But it is so much heavier than what you might think that caused it to break repeatedly. And so what had happened over the years was that many of these little scrolls and volutes simply chipped off. And so what Mark Gervasi, our wood conservator, was able to do was in spots like this, you can see this is part of the original screen, and this half is all brand new. And Mark was able to procure teak for this carving, and so he spent about 90 hours in his studio carving it. And you might say, as we're looking at this with a flashlight on a computer screen, Kevin, Mark sort of missed a spot here. This is not quite as finished as this. And Mark told me, he could have spent another 90 hours on this piece. He has the skill to create this perfect curve. But there's an idea in art conservation and art restoration about leaving your work clear, and so that future generations, future curators, future craftsmen can not only reverse the repairs that he made, and so for that he used hide glue or animal glue. Hide glue is able to be simply dissolved with heat and water. You don't have to use harsh chemicals. So if I was truly evil, you could actually simply remove all of these repairs, and we could go back to the screen as it was found in 2020 with all the missing pieces. The other thing, and the reason that he sort of carved it to this level that meets the aesthetic but doesn't quite match the original, is that when I look at this under close light, I can clearly see what is the hand of the original unknown craftsman and then what is the hand of Mark Gervasi. But what's interesting is that when you step away, you lose that distinction. And so that's really in art conservation an idea that is very much sort of universally accepted, that the repair work should allow us to appreciate the object in the object's context and for the object's history. And so as guests revisit Cranbrook House when we reopen to tours later this fall, I hope that guests will walk by the screen and they will appreciate the beauty of the screen. They will see the detail, but they won't necessarily be able to distinguish between Mark Gervasi and our unknown original artisan, because no one is going to be ripping out a flashlight and seeing that this entire floral spray is actually brand new, and it's attached to some of the original carving. And so Mark has sort of mirrored and repeated the forms, but he told me, Kevin, I could have put another 90 hours and another 90 hours after that carving this piece. Teak is so difficult to carve, and the skill of the original maker is so high. I had to stop somewhere, and I think that this is what you need for a screen that is very dark in a very dark room, and that overall has this certain filigree. And so Mark took it so that we can appreciate the filigree, we can appreciate the symmetry, but he didn't quite intend, he never sought to recreate exactly what the original carver had done. Now, what's also very interesting is that on the back of the screen, it is also carved. And so you'll see that on the front of the screen, where you could see the different flowers and faces, on the reverse, it's much simpler, but you still have this sort of scoring and decorative line work across the screen. Now, how this beautiful teak folding screen was used was it was a way of blocking the staff as they came in and out of the butler's pantry. And so the butler's pantry is that door behind where I think they're actually currently having a meeting. And originally this door over here, which if you are very familiar with Cranbrook House, you know leads into the kitchens. This door wasn't here because in 1908 the house was smaller. So this door was added in 1919. In the original layout of the house, the family, the Booths and their guest, for a Sunday dinner or for any sort of holiday function, even just a regular meal, the Booth family was not going to go into the staff's domain. You've probably seen Downton Abbey. You know how shocking it is when Cora shows up downstairs. There really was very much an upstairs-downstairs divide. And so the screen really marks the transition, that sort of liminal space that is half the Booths, half the staffs. And so the screen was used to block noise and visual sort of clutter, so that as the family ate and the staff was swinging in between the butler's pantry in and out of the dining room, there would be this sort of protection, this screen. It's the same reason that we use screens today if you think about any event or party or even a restaurant that you've been to where the wait staff is going in and out of the kitchen, and there's usually a screen or a folding door of some type to serve as that transition. Now, I thought it would be fun to share a little bit about, since our screen is coming from Trumbull Avenue here in the dining room, and I believe that this is the same screen that the Booths used to protect to differentiate between the dining room and the kitchen in their Detroit house. The cook herself, Bertha Lightzow, also came from Trumbull Avenue to cook here at Cranbrook House. Now, she was not the Booths' first choice of a cook. She had worked for the Booths for about 5 years, and Bertha was known for her rather sort of hot and cold temperament. And so Mrs. Booth had hired a Mrs. Sherry, and her husband, Mr. Sherry, was a houseman, so he was a sort of handyman. They were from England. They had only been in the U.S. for a very short amount of time, and the Sherrys did not like it here in the country at Cranbrook House. They only lasted 2 days, and after Mrs. Sherry left, the Booths are up here without a cook in the middle of the country, and so who gets the call but Bertha? And so Bertha Lightzow is brought, and she's sort of convinced to come from Detroit to the country against her better inclination, because Mrs. Booth helped to convince Bertha, German immigrant, that the young Sam Morley was going to be the estate supervisor, and he was handsome, he was single, he was smart, and Bertha was, I'm sure a lovely lady. And so Bertha comes up, and she has this hot and cold relationship with Sam Morley. For about 5 years they are together, and Bertha would be in the kitchen cooking, Sam was out on the grounds, and then one day Bertha got wind that Sam Morley had proposed to Fanny Panchett. And Fanny was the daughter of a farmer who ran a farm that's under Christchurch, Cranbrook. And when Bertha heard that Sam and Fanny were engaged, not happy. And so she ends up running into Sam on the Lone Pine Road, and she asks him, is it true? Are you engaged to Fanny? And Sam says, yes, Bertha, we are not together. And Bertha takes out a pistol and shoots him. Now, Sam lives long enough to tell the police or whoever finds him that it was Bertha who shot him. They come up here and they search Bertha's room upstairs, and she had taken the pistol and sewn it into the mattress to try and hide the weapon. She is arrested and she goes on trial. She's the first woman to be accused of murder in Oakland County. George and Ellen Booth testify at the trial, as well as other members of the Cranbrook House staff. And in the end, the lawyer that George Booth hired for his cook to represent her makes the argument that the sort of hot and cold relationship with Sam had made Bertha crazy. And so she pled guilty on reason of insanity. And after 3 hours of jury deliberation, Bertha Lightzow was acquitted on the murder by reason of insanity. Now, Ellen Booth then sent her out to the countryside to get more fresh air before she could return to cook. And she ended up never coming back to Cranbrook House. And the screen presumably was used to protect the noise and mess of the kitchen of another cook here underneath the leadership, underneath the employment of George and Ellen Booth. And dear Bertha never came back. So a sort of tragic tale, a very dramatic tale, one of the few truly insane stories associated with the staff of Cranbrook House. And all of that sort of took place, all of that drama between Sam and Bertha took place behind the screen in the series of kitchens and butler's pantries in the other end of the house. I just thought that would be a fun tale to add onto the screen because we haven't ever shared that story here at Live at 5. But again, I want to thank the members of the Cranbrook House and Gardens Auxiliary Cultural Properties Committee, as well as the Cranbrook House and Gardens Auxiliary Leadership for funding the restoration of this truly beautiful and exquisite teak screen. Now, when house tours resume in a month or so, you will be able to come and check out this screen and see it for yourself. And I think even though it comes from a different house and a different suite of furniture, it really beautifully complements all of the oak carving that was done by the German-American woodcarver Joachim Jungwirth, to the design of Albert Kahn with the fireplace, and to the design of our own George Booth, who, of course, designed his own dining room suite of furniture, and all of it in Victorian eclectic Renaissance revival style. I think that brings us to a conclusion for today's Live at 5. I will be back next Wednesday for another tale of Cranbrook's past. If you have suggestions of places that you would like to see, or if you have questions about the campus, art, objects, artifacts, or anything else that you want to see me discuss here for Live at 5, don't forget to email me at center@cranbrook.edu or leave a comment here on the Facebook post. You have just a few more days to get over to Cranbrook Art Museum to see our landmark exhibition With Eyes Opened, A History of Cranbrook Academy of Art Since 1932. We saw Andrew Blauvelt, director of the Art Museum, discuss that show last week at Live at 5, and I know that you really will enjoy it if you can make it to campus in the next few days to see that show. It closes Sunday at 5 o'clock. Keep your eyes peeled for on your email inbox. We will be relaunching the Cranbrook Center 3 house tours soon. That tour will go in one afternoon from Cranbrook House to Sarnen House to Smith House. And shortly after that, around the same time, the House and Gardens will be relaunching its house tours. And so lots more to come here from Cranbrook. Thanks so much for joining for another Live at 5. Thank you to Mark Gervasi and his skilled hand at both procuring a piece of teak to repair our screen, which wasn't easy or cheap, and his skilled hand at carving this really beautiful relic. It is our job here at the center to care for all of Cranbrook's thousands of cultural properties, and any time that I can bring something out of a basement where it is stored in questionable shape, in questionable conditions, and bring it out back to life where it is in the home that it belongs to, that it was purchased for, that it was used at. It's really always a joy to have projects like the screen come to fruition. So thanks so much for all of your support for the Center, for the House and Gardens, and for the Cranbrook educational community. Until next time, everyone.